All right, welcome everybody to the Mid-Jersey ATD chapter weekly webinar. We've got some exciting content for you today. We got Nick Floro, who is going to be sharing ways to think about web conferencing and finding the right tool, as well as giving us a chance to explore the tool Miro. Nick is co-founder and learning architect at Sealworks Interactive Studios. He's got over 28 years of experience in developing learning experiences, applications, and web platforms. He is passionate about how to design, and about how design and technology can enhance learning, and loves to share his knowledge and expertise to teach, inspire, and motivate. As a learning architect, Nick gets to sketch, imagine, and prototype for each challenge. He has worked with startups to large organizations to help teams understand technology and develop innovative solutions to support audiences reaching millions of learners. And with that introduction, we're going to turn it over to Nick, who is going to run the show. Take it away, Nick.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to make sure I can share my screen. Should see that in a second. Here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is in the first part of the session here, we're going to go through a couple of slides and kind of give you an overview of how you can get selecting the best web conferencing tool. And it's all based on your audience, of course. In the old days, like 3 months ago, we were all in the office in different types of organizations, working together and doing a lot of work with remote teams as well. And one of the challenges is how do we work with everybody now that we're all working from home? So there are a couple of different things that we have to think about, workspace, how we communicate when more than one person has to be on a call. I've got 2 kids and they're on Zoom conferencing with their teachers, and I'm on a call and my wife's on a call. So it's a lot of fun to figure out in a small place how to get everyone to be able to do their own thing. So my goal over the next 20 minutes is to kind of give you an overview of what I've learned over the years and over the last 3 months of how to apply and improve the way that you can use these different tools to facilitate and collaborate. And in the second part of the session, we'll actually do some hands-on stuff. You guys had a little bit of homework. If you didn't get to do it, that's fine. We'll play with that as we go. And I'll start, and we'll give you guys a copy of the slides afterwards, so you can kind of look at those after. And the first ideal is to think about when you're in a web conference or collaborating is that you always want to do a test drive. So no matter which tool you end up selecting, make sure that you play with the software and get comfortable with it. So you might ask one or more of the peers or some of the ATD members here to play around and experiment with you to see what works best. You also want to do some testing. If you have kids or spouses and they're playing games or downloading movies, that will take up a lot of bandwidth. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you can kind of test where you're actually going to be and how that's going to work. One of the most important things when you're communicating is your microphone. So whether you're using the microphone that may have came with your phone, or whether you invest in a USB or USB-C or just a regular audio jack microphone, it's good to have one that's comfortable on your head, that you can look good on video if you're using video, but you also want to be able to move around. Me personally, being Italian, I use my hands all the time and like to walk around the office or the house, so I'll want a wireless set. But that's really key. And a lot of people will say that, investing a little bit more in a good headset is worth it, because if you don't sound good, you're breaking up, then people get frustrated, and might be a bandwidth thing. But typically, if we invest a little bit more in our microphone, that will help improve it. The other thing that we want to look at is our video device. So if you're using an older laptop, the camera that came in that laptop may not be of the highest quality. So you might want to invest in an external camera. They're really hard to get right now with everyone being at home now. I've seen the prices skyrocket, which is kind of crazy, but it is possible if you have the budget to invest, or if your organization, if you're facilitating a lot of these, you might want to invest in a newer laptop to help get a higher quality. The faster the processor, the more you can do with your different screens and sharing and so on. So from best practices standpoint, the team here put everyone on mute, which I think is really good when we're doing a push kind of conference or session. Investing in the audio and video, making sure you have proper lighting. So if you're near a window, make sure the window is not behind you, because then you'll kind of get blown out. So having lighting in front of you will help you look more natural or better. So whether it's a little fluorescent light or a natural light, just thinking about positioning and testing that. So you don't want to be running around right before a call and then just like, here I am. If you have the opportunity, having a producer on the call, if you're working on a larger collaboration where someone might be taking notes, someone might be facilitating the controls like muting and unmuting or sharing screens or prepping things. That can really help, and it all depends on what you're doing. Love to hear your thoughts and your experience as well when we get into the collaborative part. The other thing is making sure you're focused. So if you're using a video camera and you're not looking at it, or if it's to the side, doesn't look like you're paying attention, just like when you're in a meeting, if you're taking a lot of notes, you want to make sure, best practices in that way are also followed so that it looks natural. One of the other things that we have to look at is adding a stand. So you can invest in a stand starting at $20 going on up, and you want one that will allow you to adjust your laptop or your device to the right height so that when you're not looking up your nose kind of thing, you want to make sure that you're looking at a slight angle. Usually they say 15 degrees gives a more professional look, and it kind of engages your other people that are working with you on that remote call. If you don't want to buy a stand, you can also use some books. So I have a combination of books and stands at home so that I get the right height and it kind of lifts it to the right spot. But get creative, especially when we're all working from home now. We got to do what feels right, what makes sense in our personal spaces, and however you can best communicate really helps. One of the fun things, I love experimenting with the different tools. So a couple things that you can look at if you have a little bit of a budget, or your organization's going to allow you to get some stuff. One of my favorite series is the Elgato. It's ELGATO. And they have lights. They also have a green screen. So if you're using a platform like Zoom, that allows you to swap out your background. Also with the proper lighting, it makes you look more natural, looks better. You don't want to be in a dark environment or next to a window, because that will make you look blown out. One of my favorite toys that they also make is a product called Stream Deck, which is a controllable device where you can set up all kinds of macro keys. So if you're doing a lot of calls and you want to be able to mute, turn video on, switch cameras, switch screens, you can have this little board in front of you where you can touch, and it will trigger all the different elements. And the pricing's there, and it varies depending on the time of the year and what's happening in the world. Computers start at a couple $100s and work their way up depending on how much power you want. If you have time to play, like a lot of us do now as we're figuring out what we're doing, there's a great platform called OBS Studio. And what it allows you to do is basically use your video camera and take a Keynote or PowerPoint document or sharing of a screen, and you can actually position yourself similar to what they do in like Twitch broadcasts and so on, but it allows you to very easily, very quickly be able to record a video with yourself or your team and share that as an MP4 within a couple of minutes, depending on how much editing you need to do, or if you can do it in one shot. That's great. Having additional equipment like a tripod or a microphone stand might be beneficial. If you have a higher quality camera, a lot of those camera companies now are allowing you to turn those into really nice webcams. Seems kind of crazy because some of those cameras are several $100s on up, but that will give you a super high quality, super focus. If you have that object, that camera in your office or home space, you might be able to grab it and utilize that as well. So that's kind of like configuring and playing around with all your gear that you have, or you might have access to, or you might expand in the future as we get used to the new normal. One of the things that we have to figure out when we're looking at using these different collaboration tools is, what does our audience need and how do they actually start to interact? One of the questions I would ask or think about when I'm working on a web-based collaboration is how many people are going to be involved. So if you're under 10, you might use one product. If you're at 100 or more, you might use another product. So that it's really important to evaluate and understand how many people will be in this meeting or event, so you can kind of figure out what's going on and how you can actually work with all of them at the same time. Most of the tools that are out there today will support several video windows at the same time. So if you have a panel, they can all be on video. The participants, if you're kind of pushing data, they might just be in listening mode and watching mode. It's fun when everyone's on video like we're doing today, so that everyone kind of see what everyone else is doing and how they're doing, which is kind of cool. If you're the facilitator or speaker, one of the things I would recommend is thinking about plan B, the backup plan. So the ideal that if your main system crashes or something goes wrong, what's really cool with a lot of the tools that we have today, they will run on your phone, your tablet, or if you have a second computer in the house, you can also utilize that. So a lot of times when I'm doing a bigger conference or meeting, I will have a second device so that if something goes wrong with the primary device, I can flip over to it and just kind of pick up without any hesitation or delay. So something to think about, and if you have an older laptop, that might be a good backup to utilize. If you have a tablet, most of the software today will run on those devices as well. It's something you just want to test and prep for. One of the other things that we want to look at is when we're doing these kind of meetings is how do we facilitate collaboration so we don't lose out and we're not just kind of pushing like we are right now. We're like kind of downloading data to everyone in the audience. So one of the options of doing that might be recording so that we can record what's happening, but you also want to think about different ways to make the session interactive. So some of the ways that we do that today is looking at the controls that are offered within our software packages. So down at the bottom, we have the Zoom platform, and you've got the chat window. You can see how many participants are in there. We look at how we can share our screen. You can see this person has multiple apps open. On the upper right-hand corner, we look at GoToWebinar, and the ideal is that we need to get comfortable with the tools and look at what we can actually do within them. So most of them have chat. You can make that only to the speaker. You can make it to everyone. A lot of them, if you don't disable it, allow for direct chat as well. So if I had a question for Oliver, I can chat him directly without everyone else seeing it. So those are the different kind of things that we need to think about. One of my favorite things as a learning architect is to be able to annotate. So this is using Zoom on an iPad. I love drawing on the screen, so I'll use my pencil and my tablet, and I'll just start drawing or sketching, and as I'm communicating with the team, it's a lot easier to kind of point to or highlight different things that we want to work on or check out. So if you have a iOS or Android tablet, my favorite is the iPad with the Apple Pencil because it's so natural and easy to start sketching. You can actually run the software on that device, and then you can see down at the bottom, we can select a color, you can select different shapes, but you can turn that on so only the speaker can do it or anyone within the meeting can do it, and I personally love that. So you might ask different team members to use a color or to highlight, or one person's speaking while the other people are taking notes or highlighting elements. But that's something that's really important for me in what I do. If you're pushing data where everyone's kind of in a listen mode, there are also, depending on the tool, feedback prompts. So a lot of the tools, you might ask a question and everyone can just select yes, no, go a little slower, go a little faster, thumbs up, thumbs down. I really like what you're saying. I'm taking a coffee break. We're running out of time. And then you have some different color reactions too. So depending on the application that you select, you might want to evaluate and see which ones best fit with your audience so that they feel comfortable and they understand what they're doing. It's also really good at the start of a meeting to highlight these different commands and prompt your audience to use them in a fun way or interactive way. So you might bring up a question. So I might be like, hey guys, let's go into the chat window now and we'll add some notes. So here you can see in chat, I can go down to the bottom of the screen and start typing, or I can say, hey, only send to the host or to everyone what I'm thinking or what I'm liking or how I'm working with that different element. So good to think about how you might utilize these different techniques. One of my favorite things that I hadn't thought of that I saw earlier this year was using the Adobe Connect platform, and it was at an e-learning guild event where they were online, but the speaker, the facilitator, was asking everyone to think about in 3 chat windows, 3 different questions. So like prior to this session, what were you thinking? During this session, like what are you thinking now, and how will this might change you in prompt 3? So the idea was all of the people within the audience were typing into each one of those chat windows, one after the other, but you were able to see the stream of thought from everyone. And I was blown away. I thought that was a really fun, amazing way when you had 100+ people and we can't have video on or audio on with everyone in the call because that would be kind of chaos, to facilitate and utilize some of the tools that are available. So you want to think about, and one of the ways that I learn is just watching how other people do these different things. And in the last 3 months, we've had so many opportunities to look at different events. I know the the NJ group here is doing events every week. So you want to take advantage of and look at the different styles that people do and how they're utilizing some of these tools. The other thing that you can think about is using surveys. Whether you prompt or ask a question, you can get feedback so everyone can kind of check off a box or vote or type in an answer. And depending on the tool that you're using, this is also Adobe Connect, you can have it display the results, or you can have it display only to the host, and then the host would communicate back what's happening. So it's up to you to figure out what the right combination is. Depending on your audience, you might test one or more of these elements in little pieces so that you can kind of feel what gets the best reaction for the audience that you're working with. One of my favorite things with Zoom is when you're recording, Zoom now has a function, and WebEx also offers this now, where it will automatically take your recording and it will build in the transcript. And with Zoom, they're using a platform called Otter.ai. And this is a really cool platform. You can actually sign up for free and get 600 minutes a month, which is really cool. But what's nice is that it also works on your phone or your tablet. And what's cool is that if you have permission to do the recording, it will transcribe anything that you feed to it. So whether it's an audio file, a video file, a live meeting, and it will give you that text file. And what's really cool about Zoom and WebEx today is that as you look at the transcript, you might click on a particular part of the transcript and it will automatically move you to that part of the recording. So it makes it a lot easier. Like, what did Nick say about Otter AI? I can click on that part of the transcript and it brings me back to that context and I can re-listen to it, which is amazing, and it makes it a lot easier for people to connect with what you're saying and share that information. So that's a great tool to utilize and think about how you can work on it if you're working with a client or a stakeholder and you're doing one-on-one or one-on-a-couple. You can also teach it the voices. So it will actually transcribe and say, that's Nick, and that's Michelle, and that's Oliver, and so on, which is really helpful because then you know who said what and how they said it. What's really important is that you get permission, that you're recording, and that you're going to share that or utilize that. So that's something you need to either do at the beginning of the meeting or prior to the meeting, have everyone sign off on that depending on your setup, your organization, how they'll start to work with that data. So that's Otter AI. It works on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and it's cloud-based, so it allows you to grab something that you uploaded from one device or another. I've also used it with my kids where they've had homework where they were doing some analysis of news programs, and we were able to set the phone in the middle of the room and it picked up everything from the TV without wiring anything. And it even picked us up whispering in the background, which is kind of crazy how good the microphones are today. But it put everything there, and we were able to open it up in a Google Doc and analyze that and then utilize that. So again, just taking advantage of the tools that are available. Again, 600 minutes for free per month, and then you can sign up for a low cost if you need to use it more often, depending on how many minutes you need to transcribe. You can sign up for the respective program that allows you to do that. So when we think about all the different collaboration tools that are out there and some of the tools that we may have, sometimes our organization gives us the tool and we need to utilize that. So with some of our stakeholders we work with, they use WebEx, some of them use GoToMeeting, some of them use Zoom, some of them use JoinMe. So I'm gonna flash up a warning and just say, please note the data that I'm about to share is as of about 9 a.m. this morning. So things change rapidly in our industry with technology. So this may have changed in the last 3 hours. So just be aware of that when you're thinking about it. So these are some of the tools that are out there and you might be evaluating or thinking about or just have to use when you're working with your different stakeholders and organizations that you might work with, whether you're internal or an external partner. So we work with some larger organizations that use BlueJeans, which just got bought by Verizon. Zoom has skyrocketed in their use in the last 3 months, and they've had a lot of negative press recently around some of their privacy challenges and security, and they've been rapidly fixing that and making it better. I think at the end of this month, they go to a 5.0 version that's mandatory and that resolves a lot of that. Me personally, I've been using Zoom for about 3 years now as our primary tool. We used WebEx prior to that. And what I love about Zoom is that they're quickly innovating and making it easier for us to use our phones, our tablets, or our computers to interact and talk to the people that we need to talk to. So when we look at the screen, the ideal is that we want to look at and kind of reorganize how these tools work. So this would be the magic screen that I would screen grab or look at afterwards. And we kind of fall into 4 different areas. In the left side here, I'm just going to hit escape and just use my annotate tool. So on the left-hand side here, we have different tools that allow us to go in and do screen sharing. So Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Google Meet, BlueJeans, JoinMe, Skype. What's great is that all these different products offer free or trial versions, so you can start to experiment or play or test drive them and see what works best. If you're forced to use one or more tools, you really want to get comfortable with them. So you might sign up for one prior to your meeting and kind of see how the controls work and function. They all work a little bit differently, but these tools are great when you have 1 to 100 people that you're interacting with, and most of the products run about 20 bucks a month, and if you pay for the full year, you'll get a discount. You can also pay for it bi-monthly, but it's typically cheaper to buy it for the year because you'll save that money, and you can utilize it as often as you want. Some of the tools work better than others. So based if you're a Windows user or a Mac user, or if you want to use your phone or your tablet, those are things that I need to consider, and I'll share with you a rubric in a second. The other category that we look at when you're working on a bigger event are event platforms, and these are tools where you might be talking 100 people to 1,000 people. And again, depending on how you're doing it and where you're doing it, you need to consider what makes the most sense for your audience, kind of those things we talked about at the beginning. One of the biggest ones that is out there, but is also suffering from its age, is Adobe Connect. A lot of people utilize this in large forums, and we'll look at a couple of the controls and how it works. The other big ones are WebEx, Zoom, GoToWebinar. There's a brand new one that's been out there for about 2 years now. I say brand new, it's kind of funny, but it's 2 years old, is Webinar Jam. And they have some really unique features if you need to sell or prompt users to jump to different things that you want to facilitate in an e-commerce type of mode. So again, depending on the audience, if you're selling something or helping people to understand, hey, buy this product and you get you get X, or you get a free version of this for so many weeks or months or whatever it might be. So those are the kind of things we need to think about. Also, control of the room. So if you have multiple speakers or panel that's talking, some of the tools work better in facilitating or sharing screens or moving things around. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of Adobe Connect. The 2 areas on the right, communication platforms. We use Slack in-house, and I've got 15 people that we work with on our team that are scattered around the world. And Slack has been great. We've been using that for a couple of years. A lot of organizations use Microsoft Teams because it's part of the Microsoft library, and they may have it already because of other services that they have. I personally think the user interface is lacking in a lot of ways. I think Slack is kind of the standard today. Jira has one. There are a couple other ones that are out there. But what's really cool about these tools is that they allow you to also screen share, do video conferencing, do audio through VoIP, and they also allow you to throw files or chat. So when you're working with someone every day, or if you're planning something, you can sign up for a free account on Slack as an example and kind of play around with it. There is a limitation of how much data can be stored, but what's great is that when you're in that quick mode, I can pick up the call, pick up the headset and call 2 of my teammates and say, let's talk about this, and we can start drawing on the screen with our mouse or our tablet, whatever device you might be using. There are some weird things with these quick communication platforms. So like Slack no longer supports screen sharing from the phone to the computer. Not sure why, but that's something that they dropped, I guess, because not enough people were using it. And Teams has some, I mentioned earlier, the UI isn't as great. It's gotten a lot of positive press. So we are forced to use it with a couple of our stakeholders, but I don't enjoy it. And that's important when I'm doing my job. I need to be able to quickly communicate and interact. So I will do my best to try to get people where we can be more collaborative and work together. And I think Slack is a great platform for that. Discord is an up-and-coming platform. It started out as a game environment, so kids are using it to play Minecraft and the latest shooter games. And the ideal is that it allows you to share your video game, but also chat and interact. And What's really cool about it is it allows you to customize the platform. So we're starting to see some development teams use Discord as their main platform rather than Slack or Teams. And that's really interesting to me, just to see what's happening or why they're doing it. The fourth category that I kind of classified to help everyone understand is live streaming, and there are dozens of platforms out there. The bigger ones are Twitch, which is owned by Amazon now, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and what's really cool is that all these platforms, you can turn your camera on and be talking to everyone or no one, depending on who's there and what else is going on that day. Crowdcast is another very cool platform that works inside your browser. And the ideal, again, is depending on the chat features, the sharing features, how many people might be talking, you have to decide and evaluate which one is best for your particular audience, which makes it
Hey, Nick,
fun. Yeah.
we've got just a couple questions in chat there, and maybe you could just sort of broadly speak about some other platforms like Canvas and Sakai that are maybe more LMS, and maybe position those versus the ones you've just been talking about a little bit, just to give folks some context?
Yeah, so for me personally, one of the biggest requirements for using these different tools is, the audience that we're talking to. So within an organization, if you're working with one of the tools you just mentioned, you're probably working with a university or a school that is, connected to a larger platform, and you're required to do that. With me, I don't know if I'm working with someone next door or someone around the world. So one of the things that I personally love about Zoom is that, and most of the other platforms have adopted this model now, I want to be able to click the link and be able to be right in the meeting without installing any software or having to go through hoops with my IT department to say, can I install this or can I use that? So in the old days, like with WebEx, that was a big deal breaker because we weren't able to connect to some organizations because they were using one of the other platforms. So like, for example, Google Meet is free. It's part of the G Suite platform, and you're able to utilize that chat as well as video and audio conferencing. One of the coolest features it has is that if we're all sharing our screen, we can all be doing it at the same time, and I can be saying, let me see Ken's screen. He's talking about something right now, and I would see his screen, or it would automatically switch if I didn't specify to whoever was then speaking. So it really comes down to if you're being, here's the tool you need to use, and then getting comfortable with those platforms. Some of the challenges that I personally see is I use on my office setup, I have 6 monitors. So some of the platforms won't allow us to share one of those secondary monitors. It forces you to use your primary monitor, which is where I might have all of my setup stuff. And I'm like, does that make sense?
Absolutely, thanks.
All right, cool. So I got to turn off annotation, always fun. So that's one of the things you got to get used to. If you're in annotation mode, you can see I'm still drawing, so I can't click on anything. So you got to remember to turn that off, and that might be a keyboard command or a button that you hit to make it easy to go. So for me, my audience is typically 5 to 20 people. We work with different groups. We often use video, especially in the last 3 months. I think if you can use video, that's a really great thing to do because it makes it more real. It's just like you're sitting around a meeting. If you're using a platform like Zoom, if you haven't tried it, there is a virtual background feature. Microsoft has the next coolest feature where they're automatically blurring, and they're working, if they haven't already released the green screen, blue screen feature as well. But they're actually, if you have like the kitchen table behind you, it will focus on the speaker versus what's behind you. So that's a nice feature. If the kids are walking around in the background, you would only see the person that's closest to the camera, which is kind of cool. For me personally, screen sharing and annotating is the most important functionalities. So the other thing that we see is like in the upper left-hand corner here, we see WebEx where it was and where it's gone. So they've, rather than showing all these controls on the screen, now it's a more expanded UI where the commands are overlaid on top of the screen or on top of the person that's speaking. And a lot of times the tools that we're using, you've got a grid mode or you've got the ability to separate. So Zoom has a great feature that's hidden in advanced where when you have multiple screens, you can have one screen that's dedicated to everybody and one screen that's dedicated to sharing. Did you also know, like with some of the tools, you can turn on multiple screen sharing? So I mentioned with Google Meet now, which was Google Hangouts, you're able to specify whether the people that are in the audience can also share. And with Zoom, you can have, I think, 2 at the same time if you have more than one screen, which is great. So you can also see like the difference between Zoom. You've got, if you have everything on as one screen, you'll see all of the people around it, and that might be on top or to the right, depending on the version that you're using and what your setup is. A lot of times you can also say, just show the primary speaker. With WebEx, they show it along the bottom, or there'll be a little window that pops up with the current speaker. I mentioned Adobe Connect earlier as well. This is a platform where you work with what they call pods, which are windows, and within each window you can have different things. So your audience may only see the share and chat, but as a presenter or one of the facilitators, you will see several screens which you can utilize to say, Ken's here, Nick's there, Oliver's here, and Alex is over there. And you can flip-flop between the different speakers so that I don't have to say, hey, Ken, can you stop sharing so I can share? So it allows for a more freedom of flow, which is important when you're producing or charging for an event. The other thing I mentioned, just to kind of show you visually, is that when you go to screen sharing, depending on your setup, you may see one window, or if you have multiple screens, these will be all your screens that you have available plus your windows. So if you have Microsoft Word open, you have 3 documents open, you can say, just share that object. Typically, as a facilitator, you're going to share your whole screen and make sure prior to that meeting or that event that you've cleared everything out so that they don't see something they're not supposed to see and everything's kind of flowing. So if you're working on bigger meeting, you might boot up in a different account. So you might have like the Nick normal work mode, and then I might have the presenter mode so that I don't accidentally show anything. Me personally, I don't care so much, so I throw everything out there. So the other thing I want to share really quick is working with devices. So all the devices that we have, our phone, our tablet, our computer, our hybrid device that's in between, most of this software will now work on those devices, and they'll take advantage of things like the pencil, that touch screen, and being able to move. And it's so freeing to be able to do that. So I mentioned earlier, being Italian, I use my hands and like to walk around, but it's really important for you to be able to have that if it's important to you. But I personally love drawing. So this is a rubric that I included in the deck, which kind of evaluates where we came from, WebEx, and where we ended up with Zoom. And along the left-hand side, I kind of highlighted what the really critical features for me were. So, audio, video, having control of that, being able to switch microphones or headsets, or I actually have 2 cameras in my desk so that you can see my computer screen versus me. And if we have time, I'll show you that switch over. I call it the Brady Bunch mode. Zoom kind of invented the ideal of having, I think, up to 32 people on the screen at the same time. WebEx and Google and Microsoft are now mimicking that. So I think 2 of them are up to 16 people, and it's very memory intensive when you have more people talking, and it's got to scale everyone down. So you have to think about, again, what's most important. For me, being on a phone or a tablet was really critical, because prior to our current situation, I would be traveling a lot, so I need to be able to grab a phone or a tablet and be able to interact. Annotations, Slack and Zoom do a really good job. I put an O for WebEx and Google Meet. WebEx does it pretty well, but it's a little bit more hidden and the controls aren't as fluid. You also, typically it defaults to having to turn it on. So depending on what's critical to you, you want to configure that and make sure that you have that ability. So background blur, that's currently a feature that's unique to Microsoft. Zoom has a feature which will do corrections. So I've got a couple of pimples, and I don't know if I have it on the screen, so you guys have to chat me if you can see that. All right, I did shave this morning, but if you can see that or not. Background replace, so if at home, I took a picture of my office, which I'm in today, but I have a green screen at home, so I am able to put my office behind me even when I'm at home, which makes me feel better. So you don't see my IKEA drawers and my socks on top of the drawer. But yeah, whatever, again, is most comfortable to you, that helps. And then reliability is really key for me. So over the last couple of weeks, we've noticed a little bit more challenges using WebEx, and that might be my personal experience, but working with several different stakeholders, whether it didn't launch or it took a little bit more time to get into the meeting, that's something that's critical to what we're doing, because we're relying on us jumping on a call and going in there. So my team uses Zoom. We use Slack as our quick go-to jump into a meeting. one of the cool features in Slack today is that it has all these different plugins. So there's one called Hallway, and what it will do is you can configure it, and you can say once or twice a day, depending on your setup, open up a 10-minute window where it forces a Zoom meeting in our case, because that's the platform that we're using. But anyone that's online can jump into that meeting and kind of like, oh, I bumped into you in the hallway, and it just helps everyone connect. Like, what are you doing? What am I doing? I have a question. So it kind of helps channel where we were. So kind of a fun thing. So in the deck that I give you guys, there's a spreadsheet format, and maybe I'll throw it into a Google Sheet, but I just kind of put in, these are the primary things that you want to think about. So across the top, you'll put the products that you're evaluating and kind of check off what worked best for you and what's most important. So you can go ahead and evaluate that. And the idea was that you go in and you're going to connect the dots and figure out what makes the most sense for what you're doing. So what we're going to do now is jump over to a platform that I'm really excited to share. If you did your homework, this is called Miro. It's M-I-R-O, and just let me show you the quick slide on it, because it's so exciting. What Miro does is you can sign up for free, and it's a fee-based platform ideally, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to use audio and video sharing, so you don't have to use one of these other tools, and it allows you to use all these built-in templates, but also create your own. So in this case, you see 3 people talking, creating a product map, but as you zoom in or out, it allows you to have a virtual board of whatever you're thinking about. So you can include video, screen grabs, product maps, sticky boards, but the idea was that we can all be working on the tool at the same time. So you see here the project manager, the UX designer. So what we're going to do in a couple minutes here is we're going to break out, everyone will kind of separate, and we're going to ask a series of questions. So really quick, just to kind of show you how this works, depending on the breakout room that you're in, you're going to zoom into one of the 4 rooms, and they're color coded and it says it really big. But the ideal is that depending on your keyboard configuration and what device you're using, if you're using a trackpad or you have a scroll bar, you're able to zoom in. And you can pinch and zoom if you're on a tablet. You can hit the Control+ key on your keyboard. You can also go to the lower right corner here, and you can hit plus or minus if you want to do it the old-fashioned way in the window. It's not as fun though. Zooming in or out with the mouse or the trackpad is a lot of fun. So what's really cool about this is that you can zoom into your area, whatever breakout room you get assigned to, and the ideal is that when you come in, everyone will, if you choose to, will have their own little cursor, and you'll be able to select a spot. So if you see someone typing into this first spot, go to the next spot. And the ideal is that you'll type in your name, and then you're going to answer these questions. So if you double click or triple click, depending on your configuration, it asks, what do you do? So type in, I'm a learning architect, or whatever your title is, or whatever you do, and talk about what you learned today or what you want to share. But I'm just going to ask everyone in the breakout room to kind of go through these questions and then share. And then afterwards, we'll come back, share a couple more resources, and kind of do a summary. But this is an amazing tool. If you get an opportunity, I strongly recommend test driving this, and we're using this every day to collaborate, do user stories, to gather data, to gather feedback, and it's a really fun way of doing that. So I'll pause for a second, and I think Oliver's going to make us go into our breakout rooms. And
yeah, Nick, do
hmm?
you happen to have the link to that page handy?
Yes.
You can put
I
into
will,
chat for folks.
Yep. So
Okay, so we are going to be dividing up into 4 breakout rooms. What you're going to need to do is balance Zoom and a browser window here. So if you've got Zoom maximized on your screen, hit escape, bring it down so that it's not covering the entire screen. If you're facile with having it, kind of live in half of your screen, do that. And then open up a browser. You'll plug the link that Nick just placed in, or you can actually click on it. It should open up your browser. And then you'll have that available so that you can actually work in the room with your folks. So you'll need to zoom into the room you're in. You'll see that at the top of your breakout room window, and that should get you there. If you are running into problems, we should be jumping into some of the rooms and helping you here, Nick, and Oliver and Alex and I will be jumping in from time to time, but that should get you where you need to go. Nick, have I missed anything?
No, it's really cool. Just wanted to mention, like, if you just zoom out too and you just watch everyone moving their cursor around, it's inspiring. So when you get to do something more creative than answering questions, like, grab your favorite screen, or in the practice document, we had a, add your photo. So if you want to do that, throw your photo in there above your name, again, just to get to know each other and learn about what your passions are and what you like to do. Have fun.
All righty. Nick, was there anything that you wanted to conclude with? I'm not seeing any specific questions that came out of the Miro piece, but
it's cool. Everyone have fun, I hope. That's the most important. And I think if it's scary at first when you start playing, but if you set up a board and you just invite one or two of you and just play around, it's so empowering. So I did a quick screen recording just to show how everyone was working. So here in the middle, you'll see that the majority of the people for the first couple of minutes were just kind of trying to get oriented, and then you start to spread out. And you see how the cursors are jumping around on the screen. But it's kind of cool just to watch. And again, when you have more tasks, so I added a screen grab of the Zoom meeting, and there's our host, Ken, and then the tools as well. But you can do all kinds of things like annotate, like that's the text tool. Click on that, and click on the screen, and you can type in. And if you use the arrow key, you can make it really big just by dragging. So it takes a little bit to get used to, but it's very fluid. So very cool. And then really quick, I just want to share a couple other tools that are really helpful, especially when you're at home now trying to help everyone else. If you haven't played with this Office Lens, this is a free app that works on your iPhone or your Android device. So it lets you take a picture and it automatically will zoom in. So if you have a whiteboard or a piece of paper, you notice that it goes from what's here on the left to nice and straight. And it's just using AI to automate that for you. Really cool. It works great if we get to go to an event again in the future, hopefully, physically, but lets you take a picture of the board. Really cool. The other thing is if you're into sticky notes and you're playing around, Miro has a really cool feature. So behind me on the wall over there, I have got a clear board where I put my sticky notes, but using Miro, I can take a picture of the sticky notes and it will recreate them in the environment. And it'll be pictures, but then I can retype them, or you can grab one and move it. So since you can't come to my house right now, we can do it virtually, which is really cool. And if you can't afford Miro, there's another app, $5 for iOS and Android, called PostItUp, which allows you to do basically the same thing. So here's me taking a picture of that board, and then you can see how I can zoom in just by pitching and zooming, and then moving stuff around on the screen. So you can grab a element and just reposition it. But it's so empowering. So highly recommend it. The other thing I just want to share is, like, if you have an opportunity to play with OneNote or similar, great way to collaborate, especially when you're remote. It's free, but if we're all like taking notes on what we learned this week or sharing, you can actually invite everyone to one document, and if I take a picture and throw it up there, you would all see it. So it's kind of like a blog or a notepad that is just for everybody. So strongly recommend you playing. I'm going to be quiet now. We'll make sure we share those things. We're at time, I think, unless there's any questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Nick. And if you guys just put some exclamation points there in chat as way of applause here. And awesome. We're going to do a little bit of sharing here now. So I'm going to share my screen and just give you some heads up what's coming up. There are a lot of things through our Forte partners. I'll let you read all of those there. It's on the chapter website. Really want to make sure, though, that you're aware of what's coming up for us. Next week, Josh Ehrlich is going to be doing mindful leadership, and the week after that, Sarah Scala, who's going to be talking about building engagement and performance with resilience and grit. So if it's Thursday and noon, it's the ATD Mid-New Jersey weekly chapter webinar, and look forward to seeing you all there again. Again, all this is going to come out via video, and we will see you either through email or we'll see you live next week. All right, folks, take care.